Good evening, good evening, good evening. So glad to have all of you here on today. This is the African American Prophetic Tradition class held at Memphis Theological Seminary, studying the rhetoric and theology of James Cone. Again, so glad to have all of you here. I am Dr. Andre Johnson. I am an associate professor of rhetoric and media studies at the University of Memphis and also a visiting scholar at Memphis Theological Seminary. We are again so glad to have you again for this part of our class. Each and every night we have brought you special guest lectures from some of the tops in in the field of rhetorical and literary criticism, as well as history. And we have been blessed by having them to come and to share with us. And you can watch all of them again, and we're going to tell you a little bit more near the end of this, how you can look at all of them. You can even start right here. If you're watching on my Facebook page, you can just look at all of the lectures again. If you already watched them, or if you missed any, you can catch all of these key lectures that we have had in this class. I am indeed so grateful and thankful that we have another person tonight that's going to come and just going to do such a wonderful job and going to provide us with some stimulating conversation and discussion. And we want you out there on social media in the virtual space to pose your questions or make your comments, and we'll try to get them to our speaker on today. As I have been doing each and every night, we've been doing this. If you are interested in seminary education, if you're interested in classes such as these and others, please go to memphisseminary.edu. Somebody will put that in the comments section for us, memphisseminary.edu, or you can just call 901-458-8232. Somebody will talk with you, get right back with you, and you can start taking or sitting in on some of the wonderful classes that MTS has to offer. We are again so gracious and thankful for the that we have Dr. Annette Madlock with us on tonight. She is an independent scholar and entrepreneur. She, in 2020, was named Eastern Communication Association Distinguished Teaching Fellow. Dr. Madlock was the recipient of the National Communication Association African American Communication and Culture Division's Top Book Award in 2016 and the Top Article Award in 2015. As an award-winning author and speaker, Dr. Madlock's work has appeared in, check this out now, for just the breadth and the depth, AMA journals of ethics, Journal of Women in Language, Women's Studies in Communication, FIRE, the multimedia journal for Black Studies, various Sage encyclopedias and other peer-reviewed works. Her notable publications include Health, Communication, and Breast Cancer Among Black Women, Culture, Identity, Spirituality, and Strength, published with Lexington Book, Communicating Women's Health, Social and Cultural Norms that Influence Health Decisions, from Rutledge, and of course, the one that she will probably talk a little bit about tonight, the editor of the Womanist Ethical Rhetoric volume, A Call for Liberation and Social Justice in Turbulent Times with Lexington Books. She has served as a guest editor for the Journal of Communication and Religion, special issue, Womanist Ethical Rhetoric, and the Beloved Community. Her previous academic roles include Professor of Strategic and Personal Communication at Liberty University, Associate Professor of Communication with tenure at Southern Connecticut State University. She earned her Ph.D. in Rhetoric and in Cultural Communication from the Howard University, and an M.A. in Communications from Bethel, B.A. in Organizational Studies, also from Bethel University. I am so pleased that we have with us here tonight Dr. Annette Madlock. I am so glad to have you here. Thank you for being part of this class, and we are excited about what you're going to share with us on tonight.
I am so excited too, and I'm very happy that I signed in early so I could hear a bit of that preaching that was going on and the conversation that was going on regarding liberation theology. And so I want to get started here because I know we have a little bit of time. So again, thank you so much for that introduction and the invitation. I am honored to be here with you this evening. So let me get in here and share my screen. All right. So the title of this talk that I'm going to have with you this evening is Building a Beloved Community in a Wounded World, the Womanism of Canon and the Black Theology of Cone. And I'm working with what Dr. King has described as the beloved community, but the title, The Wounded World, that is coming from Du Bois's work. And it's central and it's important because in his work, all of his work and his writing, if you go back and look at him as well in your studies, you'll see that liberation ran all through his work. And so that is why I'm working with that title. So we know we live in a wounded world. Wounded communities, wounded people, a wounded environment. The wounds are extensive, and we the people are hurting mentally, physically, and spiritually. We are wounded people on so many different levels, and we are socially vulnerable as we live in a world of increasing social unrest with wounds that just deepen, fester, and fill with pus and spread. They just spread. So this infection increases social vulnerability. And this refers to the potential negative effects of communities caused by external stresses on human health, again, mental, physical, and spiritual health. And these stresses include things that come naturally or human-caused disasters, disease outbreaks, we're in pandemics, catastrophic weather events such as Hurricane Katrina and Maria, global warming, political uprisings, insurrections, world wars, past and present, and dare I say future, ethnic and religious cleansings, mass shootings of schools, churches, and grocery stores, mass incarceration, police misconduct, housing crises, corporate greed and economic swindles. And we know this is not an all-inclusive list. You can, of course, add your own stressors. But with that being said, one of the stressors, all of these stresses, every one of these stressors is exacerbated by race. If one were to think about these practically, how do we reduce these social vulnerabilities? How do we decrease both human suffering and economic loss, all those different stressors, all the different wounds that are impacting us as human beings? So I'm thinking about the legacy of Dr. King and his call for a beloved community. And as womanists and as liberationists, how do we reconcile this? Because we live in this increasing social unrest, there's a sense of lament, yet we're still faithful that love and justice will prevail. We are people, we feel sorrow and grief that comes with all this continued loss of Black life and the social injustices, but at the same time, we're filled with hope. A hope that comes from witnessing a 21st century rainbow coalition of citizens taken to the streets to advocate for social justice that builds a better, stronger community for everyone. And we know that in recent years, there's been this proliferation in hate crimes or those crimes reported to the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, that are motivated by biases based on race, gender identity, religion, disability, sexual orientation, and ethnicity. And the most recent Department of Justice reports on hate crimes from 2020 indicates that the most prominent form is anti-Black or African-American hate crime here in the US. Crimes of hate that are woven into the fabric of the United States, into this country, have been persistent. That's why we have these continued legacies of our foremothers and forefathers fighting for liberation. But not counted in those reported numbers are the mental, physical, and spiritual violations, both macroaggressions and microaggressions that go unreported. So for everything that is reported, there are 20 more that go unreported or ignored due to various social inequalities found in systems of government, prison, education, healthcare, religion, the economy, police misconduct, or even issues related to cultural codes of silence. So individual fear and complacency play a big role in these underreportings and the actual crimes that take place. So in some progressive religious spaces, one hears this call to build a beloved community. And many of us know that the term beloved community itself was coined by 20th century philosopher Josiah Royce. However, we learned it not from Royce, but from Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who often spoke of a beloved community. He had this idea for a beloved community was that it was an inclusive place. People shared their wealth, not just financial, but earthly wealth, as far as the environment goes. Social injustice was just not tolerated. There was peaceful conflict resolution. Love and trust triumphed over fear and hatred, and all God's children rejoiced in peace and justice. So how can we create? How can we build? How can we have a place of liberation that brings us to this utopian vision? Can it even be achieved? So when I think about womanism and the beloved community, I contend that it can be brought through a womanist ethic, that the beloved community can be actualized. And many of you know the term womanist comes from Alice Walker's 1983 book, In Search of Our Mother's Gardens, Womanist Prose. And in brief, a womanist is a Black feminist or a feminist of color who values the soul and well-being of the Black community. And that's inclusive and centering Black women's experiences. And so you'll ask yourself, well, how does Alice Walker fit into that? Through several autobiographical essays in Walker's collection, In Search of Our Mother's Gardens, she praises King and identifies him as one of her heroes. He also had a spiritual influence on her. And I know you'll find writing where she says she didn't believe in that way. But there was a spiritual influence in Dr. King's notion of the beloved community, a religious and social ideal that epitomized the civil rights movement's goals during much of the 50s and 60s, shows itself in Walker's novel Meridian. The values of redemptive suffering, nonviolence, love, and community are essential to Walker's novel as they are to Dr. King's thought and work toward a beloved community. And at the same time, we have Dr. Katie Cannon, who not only critiqued white theology, but she also critiqued Black theology. And at the same time, her work is all about liberation. And it centers on Black women and their experiences. And she provides folks, women, and men the framework and language to ground their intellectual thought, their theological preparation and practice that can be inclusive of Black women's contributions to theology, religion, and even their lay work, spiritual work in spiritual communities and beyond. And these are the words of Dr. Cannon. A feminist consciousness of Afro-American women cannot be understood and explained adequately apart from the historical context in which Black women have found themselves as moral agents. By tracking down the central and formative facts in Black women's social world, one can identify the determinant and determining structures of oppression that have shaped the context in which Black women discriminately and critically interpret scripture. In order to apprehend the divine word from the perspective of their own situation. Throughout the history of the United States, the interrelationship of white supremacy and male superiority has characterized the Black woman's reality as a situation of struggle, a struggle to survive in two contradictory worlds simultaneously, one white, privileged and oppressive, the other Black, exploited and oppressed. Thus, an untangling of the Black religious heritage sheds light on the feminist consciousness that guides Black women in their ongoing struggle for survival. So it's important that we understand that Dr. Cannon is definitely working from a place of liberation for Black women and also for the Black community. So when we think about this idea of Black theology, the work of both Katie G. Cannon and Alice Walker reflects, again, that liberatory ideal, as both women are centering the lived experiences of Black people, Black women specifically. So in preparation for this talk, I had to go back and revisit the work of James Cone. And as he began to work through this whole idea of bringing liberation to Black people and challenging white Christianity and white theology, because he says, and he talk about God that fails to make God's liberation of the oppressed, its starting point is not Christian. We also have to consider a critique of Black theology, because in the beginning, it was not addressing Black women's oppression. It was very patriarchal, and Black women were basically invisible. And there are many more, but we're going to stick with these few. I think that's enough. But at some point, like you discussed earlier, he had a shift because of his interactions. And so he, like many other Black theologians and preachers, failed to see Black women. And there's still a bit of that today, but we're coming around. And there are many reasons for that, but things change over time. So like all theories and ideas, they are made and created to be built upon, and they do not remain the same forever. So Black theology, liberation theology, womanist theology are all foundational and will grow as time moves forward. And as new scholars, new preachers, new teachers, new activists come along and identify areas that need to be critiqued and adjusted, and they offer that solution to move things forward. And one of the solutions or the connections that I see between Black theology and womanism is love. And looking at an article by Marvin Wickware, it's entitled The Labor of Black Love, James Cone, Womanism, and the Future of Black Men's Theologies. He states that liberation and Blackness are reasonably understood central themes in Cone's work, but posits that love is also a part of Cone's theology. Love is inextricable from the more prominent themes of liberation and Blackness. To be Black in Cone's ontological sense is to identify with Black people. It is to love Black culture, Black skin, Black struggles, and find beauty in Black life, just as God does. To pursue liberation is to demand that divine love for Black life be manifested as human justice for Black lives. Love is the beating heart of Cone's Black theology of liberation. And Wickware goes on to say, it is the conceptual site at which the limits of Cone's theology become most clear. But this is also the place where I see the connection for building a beloved community, because it is a labor of love when we work to build a healthy, vibrant community. So we talk about the beloved community, building that beloved community. We talk about liberation. We talk about having oppressions removed. So we are not an oppressed people. We are a liberated people. We are a free people. And so with that love, all of that work, there's a lot of work that goes into that. And many of my colleagues and friends and neighbors and church members, everything that we do, whether it's professional, whether it is extremely intentional about advocacy work, we know that it's not done in vain, and it's done out of love, care, and concern for our communities. So womanist work, it is definitely liberatory work. And here I'm going to talk about that book that was mentioned earlier that Dr. Johnson talked about, Womanist Ethical Rhetoric, A Call for Liberation and Social Justice in Turbulent Times, because every contributor for this book is not only a prolific scholar in their work, but they take their work and it goes from the tower, this ivory tower, this place of privilege, and it goes out to the community. So myself, Dr. Kimberly P. Johnson, Dr. Cerise Glenn, who's my co-editor on this work, Dr. Kimby Anderson, Dr. Michelle Meggs, Natanya Listak, and Dr. Johnson, Tracy Bass, and Michelle Israel. We are working from a place of scholarship. We are practitioners. We are out in the field doing that work. And just by looking at the titles, we centered so many different spaces and places in the discourses. So you have various notions of religious rhetoric and their influence on Black women's aims for voice, empowerment, and social justice, not only in turbulent times, but all throughout the centuries and globally. The chapters use womanism in conjunction with other frames to examine how Black women incorporate different aspects of our identities into our struggles for empowerment and celebrations of who we are in holistic ways that center love and community. So we look at the spiritual and professional identities, we're looking at education, we're looking at invitational rhetoric and communities abroad. So wherever Black people are, wherever the community is, the work takes place. And so this would be a great place to start, a great place to take a look at all the work of women and their liberation, their womanism, and their outlook and how they see the world and how they're going to build a beloved community. Because womanist work is for everybody. So what is your loving solution? What will you do? Because in Micah 6:8, it says, but she's already made it plain how to live, what to do. What God is looking for in men and women is quite simple. Do what is fair and just to your neighbor. Be compassionate and loyal in your love. And don't take yourself too seriously. Take God seriously. So we can become a beloved community. And in Black Theology and Black Power, page 52, this is a reminder, without loving ourselves and our Blackness, we can truly love neither God nor our neighbor. And so I want to make sure I leave enough time so we can talk. So if you have the questions there, Dr. Johnson, I'm going to stop my share and I'm going to bring this back to you.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that wonderful discussion and talk. Let me just go now. I want to bring back up the class. So class, come on. We got a lot of loves and likes on social media. We want to hear your questions and comments as well too, social media folk. Thank you for tuning in. I want to start the questioning off, Dr. Madlock. I want you to kind of unpack again for us, because you really, you stood strong within that love ethic, because there's a lot of people who would say Black theology or even womanist theology, even when we say Black Lives Matter, that we're coming from a place of, let's just say, not love, you know, and so how do you respond to that? How is love shaped, created, and even performed within a Black liberation theological space, as well as bring in the beloved community into this as well?
When I think about love and how that's enacted and how that's performed for community, yeah, I have to love and care about myself first so I can be strong enough for you. I take that seriously. And when we are doing something for our own good, there's the love says that it's not good just for me, but it's good for somebody else too. And so that is how that liberation comes in. That is how that beloved community comes in. Because womanist theology says, yes, we're going to center Black women's experiences. And why is that? Because we've been ignored for far too long. That's why we're centering this, because our experiences bring value. They can bring change, they can bring light. And the same thing when we look collectively at the Black experience in its totality for this country, there's an oppression here. So when we look at that and we talk about enacting love in our communities to ourselves first, that's going to radiate and emanate out. And that's how that's performed and that's how that's enacted. But if you come in looking at it from an individualistic, Eurocentric perspective, and that's how you've been trained to think like that, that's what you're going to see. You're not going to see that the wellness of the community that's going to emanate, because Tanya's doing well, Yolanda's doing well, Clark's doing well. I mean, when everybody is doing well, that means the children are well. That means our community is well as a whole. So when Black women are healthy, everybody's healthy. Until we get healthy, it's not going to happen.
All right, you heard that. That's tweetable right there. That's quotable. Until Black women get healthy, nobody's getting healthy. All right, it can't happen. Class, do you have any comments, any questions? And then we will go to the folk on social media.
In what capacity are we speaking of being healthy?
We're talking about being physically healthy, mentally healthy, and spiritually healthy, because they all go together. You can't have one without the other. It all goes together.
There anyone else? Anybody else?
I have a question for you, Dr. Madlock. Thankful for your presentation and your comments. My question for you is, do you feel that men can bring an authentic interpretation of womanism?
I think so. I think so. I think with the respect of being able to see and center women's experiences and valuing those experiences, I think Black men can be authentic in their support of womanism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm glad that question came up. I'm going to need for you to unpack that a little bit more for us, Dr. Madlock. And how does that centering look from men? And especially, let me just get real particular, since we are we're talking about Black liberation theology, not a theology of the universal, but of context. How can Black men, how does it look when Black men do what you just said? Support women.
When you gave that example earlier about being able to preach that experience about the woman with the issue of blood and letting the sister do it, that is how you do that, and letting her preach from the pulpit, not from the floor. So I mean, it can start with the simplest thing, and it has to be a shift in the culture and how we look at women and their voices, and being support when it comes up, being supportive. So let me go back to Du Bois. Even in those early patriarchal days, there were things that he would do to uplift women. And so some scholars have said that he was one of the early Black feminists, a male Black feminist. He was one of the early precursors to that, because where he had influence, he let Yolanda come in and do that. She can handle that. And so he would open doors where they would be closed. And so that's where that support can come from. Liberate, respect. When you're thinking about just those relationships, when you're talking about being supportive and being helpful, help is an action word. That's an action verb. So when you're doing those things, when you're liberating, when you're removing the shackles and the oppressions that are even within our own communities that we place on ourselves.
That's right. Well, listen, this is good. Dr. Diana Watkins Dickerson is all over the chat tonight. She is, as you know, she spoke with us the other night here. I'm looking at some of her comments. She is echoing and agreeing and ashaying and amening to just about everything we're talking about. She did mention this one: we are more likely to die and or suffer from any disease or any other ailment in almost every category.
Every category, yes.
And so these are some things that womanist theologians or people with a womanist ethic will kind of just mention and bring to our attention when we are talking about, well, give me some examples, give me some ideas. So that's one right there. Dr. Diana Watkins Dickerson also have mentioned to that earlier question that I talked about Black theology, and it's not a theology of love, but it's also when people talk about womanist theology or Black theology or love or anything within a Black framework, you also get the pushback that, oh, you being racist now. That's reverse racism. And so anything that does not center whiteness or European framework, can you just talk a little bit about that? I know that your specialty is pedagogy and communication theory and a whole bunch of that. So can you kind of unpack how this centers us into a Black framework and helps us to begin to understand a little bit better?
One of the things that we have to do is we have to be very intentional about writing our story, our history. Because when you don't do that, it's easy. It is so easy for white folks to say, oh, you're being racist. It's like, no, because we've been left out of the story, and it's only been written from your particular point of view. Now we want to talk about our point of view, and let this be the beginning and the middle and the end for right for now, because there's a lot that has to go on. There's a lot that has to go on as far as our culture and our history. And if we don't write it, if we don't share it, if we don't tell it in our words, the way that we #legacy keepers, we have to be the keepers of our legacies and our traditions. And if we don't do that, someone else writes them for us. Someone else tells the story for us. It's like I was just reading about Juneteenth. You're gonna repackage everything and then sell it back to us, because they're talking about it's been commercialized along. Kwanzaa itself has been commercialized when it was not created or made in that way. Another creative idea for our liberation and our history and the way that just centering Black culture and Black ideas. So we have to write it, we have to tell it, and we have to be on it. So whenever you watch television, 365 days a year on some channel, more than one station, you are going to find something about the Holocaust. Now, mind you, I have an issue with them always glorifying the Nazi story on that, and not necessarily the humanity of the Jewish people and their families and what happened to them before they start showing all the gas chambers and things like that. But somebody else is writing that narrative, that story. So although it's playing and it's giving you this, yeah, we know the Holocaust happened, but it's playing that negative picture. And so then you wonder where all these other, the Proud Boys and all these other neo-Nazi groups keep getting re-energized. Well, any station you turn on, they're going to be talking about Nazis. And it's not that it was bad. They're given a play-by-play so it can be redone. Mm-hmm. And so that's why it's important for us to tell our story, because everything that I spent a little bit of time as a high school librarian. Every book that was on the banned book list, it was in the library. I wasn't taking anything out. And I was at an urban high school. So the young people needed to hear every one of those stories. They needed to see all of it. So and nobody in those schools is teaching anything about critical race theory. So because we are starting to have the freedom of information to publish, we aren't running into, oh, you know what? I'm not giving you any grant money for that. I'm not giving you anybody to help you write. I'm not giving you none of that. Well, we have computers now. We can dictate our stories into the computer. It'll transcribe for us, and we can publish it on Amazon. You can print copies and sell them up the trunk of your car. Just go old school with it. But we're the legacy keepers. We have to do that. That's something that we have to do. That's part of our liberation, is to tell our stories and make sure it's out there. Make sure it's out there. Rerun it on every channel, or do what the conservatives are doing. And I can't even say conservatives. That other group that's way over there. They're starting their own media. They started it early with all the evangelical television and preaching shows and all those shows, but they've expanded. So, he can be on Twitter, but we made our own Twitter. We're going to have our own this, and we'll have our own that. And so all of that is going to be in that little vacuum. And so then you have to remember, those are the same people teaching your kids at school. Those are the same people that are in your law enforcement. Those are the same folks in your military and your hospitals, your nurses, every place. And so we have to do some of that, creating our own story and making sure our Black media comes back and is stronger, because it's been dissipated. It's been very dissipated.
And may I add, not only create your own, but to support that creation as well. Mm-hmm. That is another key component to all of this. The Reverend Alma Brown, who is associate pastor at our church, Gifts of Life Ministry, she has commented on the chat. Again, Dr. Madlock, she is agreeing with you. Amen to being healthy. Reverend Brown worked in.
Tell her to keep me on the prayer list.
Right. Yeah, we are keeping you on the prayer list.
Keep me on the prayer list.
But yeah, she worked in the medical profession for many years and has helped us at the church to understand better about our bodies and our health and all of that. So I'm glad that she is checking in as well too. Jeff, I'm going to call on you, my brother. You put something in the chat here in Zoom. Do you want to kind of just unpack that a little bit? I just didn't want to read it because I probably can't do it justice. You talk about what is a racist?
So, Dr. Madlock, let me start with this excellent presentation. I really appreciate your thoughts and perspective on womanist theology. I can really appreciate that. So I thank you for that. So, you know, I heard you make the comment about racist, how every time we emphasize blackness, this is what I got from it. When we emphasize blackness, we are labeled as a racist in some sorts. And so I was thinking about that. Even the definition of a racist is someone who considers their race to be superior to another, right? And I've never, myself, viewed blackness from that standpoint. And so I said, we never claim superiority. We're demanding equality, right?
Right.
And it goes back to a discussion I was having with my wife today, because we was talking about Joey Sullipeck, one of the weathermen here in Memphis, which I've just found out made a racist comment about a basketball player, Draymond Green, right? And so the comment would say, you know, when is this knuckle dragging Draymond, you know, knuckle dragging, what do you say? He's gonna keep his knuckle dragging mouth shut while Kyle Anderson, our mild mannered, gets ejected. And so I was just thinking about this, and y'all let me know if I'm out of the box. When you have your mouth open, when you saying something, there's a problem. I'm just looking at the symbolism of this. But he said the mild-mannered Kyle Anderson. Now, this is no indictment against either player, but I'm just making a point. When you're mild-mannered and stay in your place, they have no problem with you.
Yep. Shut up.
They have no problem with you.
That's it.
But when you opening your mouth and saying something, see, now you're a knuckle dragger. You understand what I'm saying? And you all these other blasphemous phrases. So even when it goes back to that racist, you're a racist for racial uplift. Come on, man. You know what I'm saying? Y'all done had y'all knee on our neck for how long now? You know, it's time to get your damn knee off my neck. So I'm finna say something. You know what I'm saying? Like Cedric Entertainer said, yeah, I'm a grown man. I can say something, you know? So anyway, let me stop right there. But
that's it. But that's exactly it. This is racial uplift. It's time to embrace. It's time to collect and live freedom, not just talk about it, not just sit on a diversity committee and they spend 8 weeks defining diversity or start something just to say they started it, but there's never any action to it. And so the action, the movement, that's what we do. And so if you want to call me a racist because I want to have a great community, I want my kids to go to great schools, I want my neighbors' kids and the kids I don't know, the kids yet to come, to have a great school and live in a nice, peaceful neighborhood. When a 10-year-old, when you ask them what they want and they say to you, I just want to live in a quiet neighborhood, that is going to make you cry. It made me cry because they're thinking about these things. They're thinking about their neighborhood and they're thinking about what's happening globally. Why does Russia hate us? These are 10-year-olds, mind you. These are the little people in our community that are coming up. And so we have to uplift. When we uplift where we are as adults, that means our kids are going to be healthy too. So yeah, no. So if you want to call me a racist because I believe in uplift, racial uplift, back in, in the old terms, I'm a race woman. So yeah, so that's okay. I'm not claiming superiority because if our communities are better, that means your community is going to be better.
Wow. And on that note, I want us to show some love to Dr. Annette Madlock. Thank you for coming, and thank you
for
for being
having
a
me.
part of this wonderful, wonderful class and wonderful discussion. Tomorrow night, just to let everybody know, we are scheduled to have Dr. Aubrey Hendricks come, and he's going to wrap us up and talk about his new book, Christians Against Christianity, and talk about it within the framework of Black liberation theology. We are excited about having him, as we were excited about having Dr. Annette Madlock with us. So with all of that being said, I want everybody to just come back tomorrow. I don't know the specific time, but we will have it up on my Facebook page and let everybody know. And then please, please click the share button, let people know that we are here, and we will do that again. And then after that, a special invitation for some of you. If you want to come into the Zoom room, and I will say more about this on tomorrow, we want to have, because it will be the last night of our class, we want to just have a good old-fashioned fellowship. So if you want to come on into the Zoom room and fellowship with us and talk a little bit about Black liberation theology, talk about, we're going to give you information to do that as well. So thank you, thank you, thank you for coming and being a part. And until tomorrow night, as you know, class, we're going to take a break and we're going to go stretch our legs. And when we return, we will return talking about the chapters that were assigned for tonight. Thank you again, Dr. Madlock.
Thank you, everybody. And I put my website in the chat, and you can always get my contact information from Dr. Johnson. I'll be more than happy to chat, email, whatever. I'm available. All right. Bye. Good night.
Bye-bye.